Today I'm going to be showing you how I recreated the iconic Mick Gordon bass sound. Let's check it out. This preset, along with 15 other of my go-to sounds, are available in my Vital preset pack. You can find that on my Patreon, links in the description. The synth I'm using is Vital, it's completely free. I'll have that linked in the description as well so you can follow along. Let's dive into step 1. I'm going to create a blank Vital patch, then you're going to turn on oscillator 1 and 2 and set them both to basic shapes on a sine wave, and we're also going to turn on the white noise and turn the level down. Now I'm just going to copy my MIDI over so we can hear what we're doing. And we can also turn down the level of oscillator 2. We're just going to be using it for frequency modulation, so we're not going to need that. So now if I play this back, we have a really simple sound. If we turn the white noise up a bit, we get a bit of that high end. Obviously doesn't sound great yet, but there's some magic that happens when you take a sine wave and white noise and you feed them into a distortion. I'm going to turn the distortion on. I like to put it on a hard clip and then turn the drive all the way up and you'll instantly hear what I'm talking about. Probably just blew your eardrums there, but we get this super aggressive bass, and if I turn that white noise off, we lose a lot of that aggression. Now let's turn the white noise back on. Here it's a very dramatic change. Now, as far as making this bass move, there's a ton of cool things we can do inside Vital to randomize it and modulate it. First thing I'm going to do is add a bit of unison to this sine wave, and then we're going to modulate this unison detune. And I'm going to do that using a random LFO down here. I'm going to grab this random one and throw it on the detune amount, and we're just going to bring this modulator down a little bit. Now, as far as the modes, we have Perlin, which is basically like a smooth sine wave random modulation. For most of this, we're going to be using sample and hold. If I crank this up, we're already getting some really cool artifacts from that, but we're just going to keep this a little bit lower for now. Sweet. And then another big part of this sound is the frequency modulation. So we can find that by going underneath phase here and then go to FM and then oscillator 2. Now this we're also going to modulate with that same LFO. And again, that was the random one. And you can play around with the amount. I like to keep it around 0.26. So if I grab filter 2 here, I'm just going to add phaser, positive, and then I'm just going to play around with the resonance. And then again, I'm going to take random 1 and then just map it to the cutoff. And right now we have them all modulated to random 1 at the same rate. So a thing we can do as well is just to play around with this to make it fun. You know, go to random 2, set it to sample hold, then select a different tempo. So maybe 1/8. Now I'm going to have random 2 modulate that same cutoff. And another thing that adds a lot of value too is randomizing the white noise. So if I take random 2, for example, and then I'm just going to pull that all the way down and just map it up to that same point, about 0.21. The white noise kind of acts like the crunchiness of the bass. Sweet, over here, envelope 1, let's play around with this. This is automatically mapped to the level of pretty much everything in here. So we're going to turn this into more of a pluck. But now let's randomize the length of the pluck. So how about I go to random 3 now, and I'm going to grab sample and hold. Maybe I'll do 1/2, and we're going to drag that to the K. Now let's go over to the effects page and add some more effects. One thing that you probably heard in the demo is that there was this feedback sound, and we can actually create that using a filter, and then we set it to that same phaser positive, and then we're going to crank up the resonance to get the feedback. Also, if you guys are liking the video so far, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out. We're going to add a multi-band compressor. Add in the compressor. We're going to drag it at the very bottom. What I like to do is just up the lows a bit so it's less annoying and harsh. Nice. Now if we turn up the resonance, you can hear that feedback coming in a bit more. What I like to do is grab the macro 3 and then assign that to the resonance. And then we're also going to map that same macro to the mix, and we turn that all the way up. So whenever we turn this on now, it's going to create that feedback. And you can also map it to the cutoff as well, just slightly. Sweet, now if we go over to the filter, we're gonna add a post filter, and then I'm also gonna randomize this a little bit. Let's grab random 3, for example, and I'm just gonna put this on the cutoff and just very slightly modulate it. And after that, we're gonna go over to the voice page. I like to turn on filter 1 and only have oscillator 1 being filtered a little bit. And then in filter 2, I like to put everything through that. Back on the effects page, we're gonna go over to the equalizer, and then you can add this middle notch in. And I like to have this be modulated a little bit too. Let's go ahead and grab random 1 and throw that on the cutoff. And you can play around with the overall cutoff to get some different tones. And another super important part about this too is the order of the effects. So just by dragging the distortion down, let's maybe put the filter first and then the distortion. I'm going to keep the filter above the distortion, and then I have the EQ below. For some additional feedback, we can add the actual phaser module, and I'm going to turn the depth all the way down so that it's just static. And then here we can really play around with it by changing the feedback and the mix. So let's modulate this phaser now. I'm just turning the feedback up to 70, mix around 60, and now let's modulate it with random 4. I'm going to set it to sample and hold. I'm going to set this one to Perlin so that it's more of a sine wave. And I'm going to turn on the sync for this one. We're going to have that modulating the mix, and we're going to modulate the center. Another tip to get that feedback really shining through is on the envelope. You can turn off the release fully. You can hear at the tail end of almost every note, we're getting that nice Doom-esque feedback. But what I like to do now is set up the macros. So we already set up the 1, feedback. That's a really cool effect when you turn that up. I typically always like to create a lo-fi macro. So I'm just gonna name this one lo-fi, and we're just gonna map this to the high band of this EQ. So I'm gonna grab this, throw this on the cutoff, and we're gonna flip it backwards this way. So now when I turn the lo-fi knob up, it cuts more of the highs. And I'm also just gonna move the cutoff all the way up. So now we get this smooth effect. Sweet, and then the last macro here, we're going to set this to distortion. So I'm going to put this on the overall drive here, and then just bring this knob down a bit out here. I'm just going to turn up that macro too, so that it hits the top of the range. And one thing you're going to notice too, when I turn the distortion down, like when it's at this state, a lot more white noisy, which can kind of get annoying. So I'll typically map this to the level as well, and then I'll just pull it down. And you can also achieve this by clicking on the macro and then hit make bipolar. That when the knob is down, it should be actually in the negative. Now what happens is when we have the distortion down, the white noise also goes down. Obviously, there's a million things you can play with. Like one of the most obvious ones is just go down to the randoms down here, change the rate, turn on the sync, change it to Perlin. Let's try changing them all to Perlin right now. Less choppy because it's changing at a slower rate. Now let's try changing them back to sample and hold, but we're going to keep sync on. And this is a great setting to mess around with too, because now we have sync on, so it's going to be perfectly synced to the BPM of our song. If I want to set them all to a quarter note, I could do that. Get these cool modulating effects. And then lastly, where the real magic comes into play, we're going to hit read and write so that we can draw in some automation. And I'm just going to let this play and mess around with these macro knobs. And if I wanted to even keep going, make this patch even crazier, I can go to the bend for the pitch bend, set it to 12 so that we get a full octave range. And then now I can automate the pitch bend over here. Sweet, and that's a wrap on this patch. So I hope you guys got something out of this video, and I'll see you in the next one.